Hi guys, welcome back to Beginning Python. This is lesson 2. So we'll kick it off with a few review questions. You guys should know the answer to these. If you don't, you might want to go back to lesson 1 and go through the parts where I covered them. So how do you print a message or a variable? How do you make a variable called x that holds the value or is equal to 5? What's an input statement used for? So input parentheses. How do you ask the user what is your name and store that as a variable? And if var equals and in quotes epic, what type of variable is this? So make sure you guys know the answer to those. Okay, so real quick before we get into the coding, we're going to cover a few math things just to make sure you know. PEMDAS, this is basically the order of operations when you do math. So first, you do whatever's in parentheses, then you cover exponents, we won't really be needing these, then you multiply, this star symbol, then you divide, the slash symbol, add plus, and subtract minus. So if you guys want to check if you know the order of operations properly, try this equation and see if you get the right answer. If you don't, you might want to look up a few videos on how the order of operations work. So when we're doing basic math, there's four main types. So addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. These basically, just if you know what they do, we're going to use them in that way. And we have two new functions called modulo and floor division. So modulo, just like addition is plus and subtraction is minus, the symbol for modulo is this percent sign. So this basically divides two numbers and gives the remainder. So if you guys learned division before you learned about decimals, for example, if you divided 5 by 2, you'd have a remainder of 1. So that's what this does. It doesn't give you 5 divided by 2, it gives you whatever's left over when you divide 5 by 2. So 5 divided by 2 would equal 2, but since there's that 1 remainder, 5 mod 2, or modulo 2, gives 1. And then floor division basically just is regular division and then rounds always down. So 5 floor division, so 2 slashes divided by 2 is equal to 2. So even though 5 divided by 2 is 2.5, when you round down, remember you never round up, even if it's like 5.8, you always round down, so 2.5 becomes 2. So you might think about it just by like chopping off this decimal. So you divide a number and then chop off whatever comes after the decimal. So some more quick review, make sure you know the answers to these questions. So type all the four basic math operations in the chat, so addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And can you explain the difference between floor division and regular division? Remember the double slashes, and what's the difference between regular division and modulo, so the percent sign. So if you guys can't answer any of these questions or don't know the answer to either of these questions, you can just go back in the video and re-listen to my explanation. Alright. So we're going to be talking about booleans today. This is basically a statement that is either true or it's false. It's also a variable. So we use, this might look a little confusing, but we use all these symbols with booleans. So first is less than, greater than. You can think of whatever is greater is the one the crocodile is trying to eat. So this one, something here, is not eaten by the crocodile because it's less than something here. The first thing, greater than, is here, is greater than this because it's being eaten by the crocodile. And if you put an equal after either of these signs, you get greater than or equal to. So 5 is greater than 1, 2, 3, and 4, but it's also equal to 5. 10 is less than 20, but if you did less than or equal to, then 10 is less than or equal to 10. Equals equals is equal to, and the reason there's two equals there is because when we do equals, one equal, that's assigning a value to, that's assigning a value to a variable. So if I do x equals 5, then we're setting x to equal 5. But if we do x equals 5, we're saying they hold the same value. And not equal to, or exclamation mark, basically just says these two values are not the same. Alright, so if we have a Boolean statement, that's these basically equations here. Those have a value whether they're true or false. So 5 is greater than 4. That's true because 5 comes after 4. 6 plus 5 is less than 11. That's false because 6 plus 5 is equal to 11. So this is basically 11 is less than 11, which is false. And then we have 6 plus 5 is less than or equal to 11. And that's true because it's equal. So it's either equal to or less than. And 9 floor mod or floor division 2 is equal to 3. Remember the double equals. And remember, floor mod basically just chops off any decimal. So 9 divided by 2 is 4.5, but we chop off that decimal, so it's basically 4 is equal to 3, and that's false. So you guys can practice these questions. So 9 is equal to 9 times 1. 100 is less than or equal to 99. 5 plus 2 is less than equal to 10. And 3 floor division 2 is not equal to 1. And then 5 mod 2 is less than 4. Okay, you guys can take a minute and pause the video to think about your answers. Okay, so the answers, true, false, true, false, true. It's okay if you didn't get any of them wrong, but make sure you know why they're true or false. And if you don't, you can go back in the video. Okay, so now we can have an if statement. So an if statement is basically a check if a boolean is true or false. And if it's true, it'll execute code. If it's false, it'll just skip that code. So here we have if, for example, 5 is less than 4, it'll execute this code. Since that's always false, it'll never execute it. But if we do 4 is less than 5, it will execute it. So in our number guessing game, think about how we could use a statement that checks if it's true. So we have a couple examples here. So if 4 is less than 7, print is true. And this will print it because that is true. We have a variable set to 100. If x is equal to 100 minus 1, print x is 9. So nothing is printed because x is equal to 100, which isn't 100 minus 1. So now we have variable equals 9. If the variable is greater than or equal to 10, the variable is 0. And basically it won't print, or it won't reset the variable to 0. So what it is saying is if the variable is equal to 10, we'll set it to 0. But since it's 9, it'll skip this code. Okay, so try to think about what an if statement is in your own words and see if you can explain it. So now we're doing an activity. Have a variable that equals any number you want. It could be 1, it could be 1,000. And check if the variable is less than 50 and print if it is less than 50. So have like if parentheses variable is less than 50, print, like here, print it's less than 50, or the statement is true. Okay, and check if it's 25, greater than 25, and less than 50. So is it between these numbers? A way you could do that is have the first check, is this number greater than 25? If it is it less than 50? So have like what's called a nested if statement. So have an if statement within an if statement. That way, the very middle piece of code only runs if both of them are true. So an answer here, my variable equals 10. If my variable is less than 50, print we like small numbers. In this case, it would because 10 is less than 50. And a challenge, basically, if you're a little confused about what I was explaining, that's okay. But notice how we have two statements here. So if this first statement is true, it'll check is this second statement is true. And if it is, it'll print it's in between. So if it's less than 50 and it's greater than 25, it'll print in between. And we also have something called an else statement. This basically executes code only if the boolean is false. So in an example like this, if the boolean is true, it'll run. And normally, if we don't have an else statement, it'll just, if it's true, it'll run this and whatever comes after. But here, else, it'll run only if it's false. So you're only ever running one of these statements at one time. You never run both. So now that you learned what an else statement is, try to describe it in your own words. Remember, think about this otherwise. Okay. So our next activity, make a variable, set it equal to any number, again could be 1, could be 1,000, and check if it's odd or even. And notice if we use modulo, 7, which is odd, mod 2 is equal to 1, because you'll have a remainder of 1, but 6, which is even, mod 2 is equal to 0. So think about that, and figure out how you can use that to check if it's odd or even. And just to reiterate, odd number, mod 2, is equal to 1, but even number mod 2 is equal to 0. Okay, so now change your code so that your variable is even and less than or equal to 50. So like 50, 48, 46, etc. And then try to have an if statement inside of an if statement. So an answer, my variable equals 66. If my variable mod 2 is equal to 0, then it's even, again like number 6. 6 divided by 2 is equal to 3 with 0 remainder. Otherwise, print odd. So normally, if we got rid of this else statement and just had print odd, it could print even odd. But since we have an else, if it's not an even number, it'll print odd. Okay, now our for challenge. Variable equals 66, and then we have this nested if statement. And my variable mod2 equals 0, so if it's even, and if it's less than or equal to 50, it'll say perfect because it covers both of the if statements. Otherwise, if only this first one is true, it'll print almost, and if neither of them are true, this first one, it'll say oh no. So in this example, it'll be almost because it covers 66, so it is even, so it'll hit this first one, but it's not less than 50 or equal, so it won't hit perfect, it'll only hit almost. So pass or no pass. This is a game where the user will input a number using the input function, and then if the number passes all your conditions, then set pass, otherwise print fail. And remember, to do otherwise, you'll have to use an else statement. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the number guessing game. So have a random variable or a random number variable where you set the value in the code. So later we're going to learn how to have the computer generate a completely random number. But for now, you're just going to pick what it is and then pretend you don't know it or have someone else who doesn't know it play the game. And then use if statements to compare the user input value. So if your answer is 66, say if answer or if guess is less than answer, print out that your guess is less than the answer. So it's kind of like a warm versus cold. And then a quick review while you guys are working on that. This is the end of the lesson, so if you guys know what floor division does, remember the slash slash, modulo, percent, and if you remember what modulo does, remember if you can check, how can you check if a number is odd or even, what does exclamation point equals mean, and is 5 is less than 8 minus 2 true or false? If that was a boolean, what value would it return? And what goes after if in an if statement, and what are else statements used for? If you guys have all of these, then you guys did a good job during this lesson. And otherwise, you maybe want to go back and make sure you got it during the parts where I explain it. And yeah, so just keep working on the guessing game. Yeah, thanks for coming.